Introduction, the edited inheritance. Before you scroll past this, answer one question in the privacy of your own mind. Have you ever followed the advice exactly, the gratitude, the positive thinking, the letting go, and felt underneath your obedience that something was missing from the instructions? That the machine was beautiful but somebody had removed a part? Your suspicion was correct. And tonight, it gets confirmed. Every teaching you have ever quoted began its life as something larger. The ancient schools did not deal in comfort. They dealt in complete operating systems, precise, demanding, and sometimes dangerous to the people in charge. And then those teachings began their long journey down to you. Through temples that needed obedient crowds, through markets that needed returning customers, through translators who smoothed, teachers who softened, and audiences who kept what soothed them and quietly dropped whatever demanded something. Understand this clearly because it is the key to the whole book. No conspiracy was necessary. Comfort did the editing. Century after century, the operative half of every great instruction, the half with the mechanics in it, the half that made it work, was left out. What reached you is the poster. The engine was removed. That is why the advice keeps almost working. You were given real teachings. You were given half of each. Plato taught that all true learning is remembering. The soul, he said, already knows, and a teacher only reminds. So I will make you one promise about the 10 restorations ahead. When you hear the missing halves, they will not feel like news. They will feel like recognition. Something in you will sit up and say, of course. I always suspected the sentence was longer. Here is the road. In part 1, we restore the teachings of the mind, the ones that govern what you know, what you guard, and what you speak. In part 2, we restore the teachings of power, asking, thanking, believing, and releasing, in their original, uncut versions. And in part 3, we restore the teachings of the throne, the ones removed most quietly of all, because they make a person very difficult to sell to and impossible to rule. But I warn you, and the warning is the oldest one there is. These halves were not removed because they were false. They were removed because they were demanding. Once you hear them, they will demand from you too. The poster forgave you every day you ignored it. The engine will not. Before we open the first page, do one thing. In the comments, write 2 words, I remember, not for me. For the part of you that always knew the instructions were incomplete. Part 1. The Restorations of the Mind. Chapter 1. Know thyself and the missing tribunal. 3 sayings were carved at the temple of Delphi, at the navel of the ancient world. The crowd remembers one, know thyself, and wears it like jewelry. The other 2 were warnings, nothing in excess, and surety brings ruin. Even the world's most famous inscription has been edited down to its most flattering third. And Pythagoras, whose students changed the ancient world, left instructions sharper still. Never let sleep close your eyes, he taught, before you have reviewed the actions of your day 3 times. Here is the version you were given. Know thyself has been sold to you as description. Take the quiz. Learn your type. Find your color, your element, your profile, and frame it. Self-knowledge as a portrait you commission once and hang on the wall. It is pleasant, it flatters, it changes nothing because a portrait has no verbs in it. Now the restoration. To the ancients, know thyself was not a portrait. It was a courtroom, and it convened every night. The Pythagoreans lay down in the dark and walked back through the day with 3 questions, and only 3. Where did I go wrong? What did I do? What duty was left undone? Centuries later, the Stoic Seneca confessed to the same nightly habit, examining his entire day before sleep, pleading his case before himself, hiding nothing. This is what was cut, not the noun, the practice. Self-knowledge was never information you collect. It was a tribunal you hold. Welcome to the evening tribunal. And here is the mechanics of it, the reason the practice was worth carving in stone. The deeper mind quietly repeats whatever passes unexamined. An error reviewed calmly, named without excuses, loses its permission to run tomorrow. An error avoided keeps its keys. The men and women who did this nightly were not punishing themselves. They were revoking permissions. 3 questions, a few minutes, and the day's mistakes were converted from future habits into closed cases. The unexamined life was not called unworthy because it was dull. It was called unworthy because it repeats. And why was this half removed? Follow the comfort. A market can sell you 1,000 mirrors, but it cannot sell you a tribunal, because the tribunal is free and the tribunal is work. Description flatters, examination costs. So the centuries kept the compliment and dropped the court, and the crowd applauded the edit because the crowd always applauds the removal of homework. Now I can hear you already. You will tell me I do not need this. I already have a voice that reviews my failures every night. It reviews them at 3 in the morning at full volume, and it never adjourns. You are prescribing more of my disease. Let me stop you there, because you have just described the counterfeit, and the counterfeit is proof the original exists. What visits you at 3 in the morning is a heckler. It is vague, it is hostile, and it issues no verdicts, only noise. Look at your failures, it screams and offers nothing. The tribunal is the opposite creature in every detail. It is scheduled so it does not ambush. It is specific so it does not smear. It asks 3 questions without a single adjective. It names 1 correction for tomorrow, and then, this is the part the heckler cannot do, it acquits you for the night and closes the court. Hecklers circle. Judges conclude. You do not silence the night voice by avoiding review. You silence it by holding a real review at a decent hour with a gavel. So here is tonight's protocol, and it is the oldest one in this book. The Evening Tribunal. Tonight in bed before sleep, walk the day backward and answer the 3 Pythagorean questions out loud in a whisper or in ink, it does not matter. Where did I go wrong? What did I do? What was left undone? No adjectives, no speeches. Then name 1 correction for tomorrow, a single specific act, and then deliberately, formally acquit yourself. Court adjourned. 2 minutes, perhaps 3. The ancients did it their whole lives, and it made them the kind of people whose sentences we are still restoring. Write the closer, somewhere you will meet it again. The ancients never said describe thyself. A description is a portrait. An examination is a workshop. And nobody was ever rebuilt in a frame. But a tribunal needs a quiet courtroom, and yours, be honest, is full of noise. Thoughts wander in off the street all day, uninvited, unquestioned, and make speeches from the gallery. The ancients had a teaching for that too, and you know its first 2 words by heart: be still. What you were never told is that the sentence had a job attached and a guard at the door. That is the second restoration. Chapter 2. Be still and the missing watchman, be still and know that I am God. The Psalms. And from the book of Proverbs, a command with a soldier's grammar. Guard your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Here is the version you were given. Stillness as a spa. Meditation as a scented bath for the head, 10 minutes of app-guided floating sold to you as rest, marketed to you as escape. Empty your mind, they said, as though the mind were a bin. Relax, they said, as though the whole teaching were a nap. Now the restoration. Read the ancient sentence again and notice that it has 2 verbs, be still and know. The stillness was never the destination. The stillness was the condition for a job, and the job was knowing. And the Desert Fathers, the old monks who took the inner life more seriously than any people who ever lived, had a word for the practice that history left in the sand. Nepsis, watchfulness. In their teaching, the still one is not a bather, he is a sentry. He stands at the gate of his own mind the way a doorkeeper stands at the gate of a walled city at night, and he inspects what arrives. Welcome to the watchman's post. Because here is what the sellers of relaxation never told you. Your mind has a gate, thoughts arrive at it all day like travelers on a road, and at this very moment the gate stands unmanned. Anything walks in. Worry walks in wearing the coat of realism. Insult walks in and takes a room. An idle fear checks in at noon, and by evening it has unpacked, and by the weekend it is paying rent, and by next year it is on the deed. This is the mechanics the ancients understood with terrible clarity. A thought admitted repeatedly becomes a resident becomes a habit becomes a ruler, and the entire war for a human life is won or lost at the gate, where refusal costs one quiet word instead of in the citadel where eviction costs years. And why was this half removed? Because vigilance cannot be sold. Relaxation renews its subscription every month, but a watchman once trained is free forever. And because stillness with a job attached is work, and the crowd, as always, kept the bath and dropped the post, you will tell me, I have tried watching my thoughts. It is not a gate, it is a flood. They come by the thousands, and I cannot stop a single one of them. Your watchman drowned years ago. Let me stop you there because you have misread the job description, and the misreading is exactly why you drowned. The doorkeeper of a city never tries to stop the road. Travelers keep coming. That is what roads do. His power is not in damming the traffic. His power is one question, asked at the threshold of one traveler at a time. Friend of this city or enemy of it? And then the quiet authority the flood cannot argue with. The friend is admitted. The enemy is not fought, not debated, not wrestled to the ground. The enemy is simply refused hospitality. No seat, no meal, no room. And a thought-refused lodging does something the ancients watched with their own eyes and you can watch tonight with yours. It moves on. It always moves on because thoughts do not have legs of their own. They have only the strength of your welcome. So here is the protocol. The watchman's post. Twice tomorrow, once in daylight and once at the edge of sleep, take the post for the length of 10 slow breaths. Do nothing but stand at the gate. Each thought that arrives gets the single question: does this build my city or besiege it? And then admission or a courteous refusal. You are not emptying the mind, you are staffing it. And the second watch, the one at the edge of sleep, is the one your whole future is built on, because the last travelers admitted at night are the ones who work inside the walls until morning. For those final minutes, the gate admits chosen guests only. Carry the closer with you to the post. Stillness was never the vacation of the mind. Stillness was the changing of the guard. But the gate, you will notice, has an inside as well as an outside, and there is one traveler the watchman must inspect more carefully than any stranger from the road. The one that leaves. Every day, through the same gate, words walk out of you into the world, and the ancients believed those words were not descriptions but decrees. The third restoration is about the most dangerous instrument you own, and you are holding it right now, just behind your teeth. Chapter 3. The Word and the Missing Oath. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. The Book of Proverbs and the Gospel of John opens the entire story of creation with a claim the modern world quotes and does not believe. In the beginning was the Word. Here is the version you were given. Affirmations. Stand at the mirror, recite the magic sentences 5 times, 10 times, words as confetti, words as decoration, positivity as a coat of paint over a wall you do not believe in. And when the parroting changed nothing, you concluded reasonably that words are cheap. Now the restoration, and it begins with a detail buried in the oldest language of Scripture. In Hebrew, the word davar means word. It also means thing. It also means deed. One word for all three, because to that ancient mind, speaking was not commentary on reality. Speaking was participation in it. A word was an act, the way a signature is an act. And so their whole culture around speech was built like a culture around fire. Vows were binding. Blessings were transfers. A curse was handled like a weapon because it was won. Let your yes be yes. the teaching said, and your no be no, because a mouth that spends its words cheaply debases the whole currency. And then, when the day comes that it needs to decree something into its own life, it discovers it is printing money on worthless paper. Welcome to the restored word. And inside that culture sat the clause they most carefully left out of your inheritance. Never testify against yourself. Hear the mechanics of it, because this is the engine of the chapter. Your deeper mind is not a conversation partner. It is a court recorder. It does not weigh your tone, your irony, your little laugh. It files testimony. And every day, a dozen times a day, you take the stand against yourself and swear, I always mess this up. I am terrible with money. I could never do that. Knowing me, this will fail. Each one filed, each one precedent. And precedent in that court hardens into ruling, and rulings are enforced in your body, your choices, your face, your luck. You wondered why the mirror affirmations did not work. They were 5 sentences of paint, presented to a judge holding 50 of your own sworn statements to the contrary, all in your handwriting, all filed that same afternoon. And why was this half removed? Because the magic words sell and the clean mouth does not. The market could package the affirmation. It could not package the discipline of a person who guards their testimony all day, because that discipline costs nothing and changes everything, and there is no margin in it. You will tell me, so now I must police every syllable that leaves me. You are turning speech into a minefield. I will end up mute, paranoid, editing my own small talk. Let me stop you there, because the restored teaching is narrower and sharper than your fear. Chatter is not testimony. Talk about the weather, the game, the neighbor's astonishing new fence, spend freely. The watch applies to one category of sentence only, the sentences that begin with I am, I always, I never, I cannot. Those are not small talk. Those are legislative sessions, and you hold perhaps a dozen of them a day. You are not being asked to guard 12,000 words. You are being asked to guard 12 sentences. That is the whole tax. 12 sentences, spoken as a legislator instead of a heckler, and the court that runs your life starts receiving different law. So here is the protocol in 2 parts. The first is the clean mouth. For 1 full day tomorrow, you will let no testimony against yourself leave the gate. When you catch one halfway out, and you will, do not flog yourself, simply restate it for the record. Not I am terrible at this, but I am still learning this. Not I could never afford that, but that is not in my budget yet. The judge accepts amended testimony. The second is the sundown decree. Tomorrow evening, once deliberately, speak a single sentence over your life in the present tense, alone, aloud, and unhurried. The way a legislator reads a law into the record, not the way a beggar rubs a lamp. 1 clean decree on a clean day is worth 1,000 affirmations shouted over your own contrary testimony. And take the closer with you, because it explains your whole family tree. Your ancestors were right to fear curses. They simply never warned you that the most dangerous sorcerer in your life would be you, speaking about yourself, casually, all day long. Before we get into the next chapter, you can download a free ebook version of this audiobook completely free. It's the first link in the description and in the pinned comment below this video. Part 2, The Restorations of Power, Chapter 4, Ask and the Missing Tense. Ask and it shall be given you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened. The most quoted promise in the Western world. And in the Gospel of Mark, the same teacher hands over the operating instructions in a single sentence that should have changed your life years ago. Whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. Read that again, slowly, and notice the tense. Not believe that you will receive it someday if you are good, if the committee approves. Believe that you have received it, past tense. The receiving is placed before the arriving. That one small verb carries the entire removed mechanics of asking, and it was sanded off the teaching so long ago that, when you hear it now, it sounds like a typo. Here is the version you were given, asking as begging. You were taught to approach your desires the way a nervous petitioner approaches a distant office. Submit the request politely upward. State that you are not worthy but hopeful. Then wait, hat in hand, checking the sky for a verdict, and take the silence personally. Ask nicely, they said, and want it very much, and the wanting itself became the practice. But examine what wanting actually rehearses. Wanting is the meditation on absence. Every repetition of I want files one more copy of I lack, and the deeper mind, which you now know is a court recorder, files it faithfully, and rules accordingly, and delivers to you, with perfect obedience, a life that keeps on wanting. Now the restoration in two halves, because two things were removed from this teaching, and each was removed for the same reason. The first half is the tense. The ancient asker did not ask like a beggar at a window. He asked like an heir reading a will. The old teachers understood a distinction our age has completely lost, the difference between requesting and claiming. A beggar requests, and his whole posture broadcasts uncertainty, and the deeper court records the uncertainty as the actual petition. An heir claims. He walks away from the reading of the will as an owner awaiting delivery, not a supplicant awaiting a verdict. The estate has been assigned. The transfer is in process. His only remaining posture is expectation, and expectation, not wanting, is the frequency the promise was written in. Believe that you have received it. File the receipt, not the plea. And the second half is the siege. Because the same teacher who gave the tense also told a story the modern pulpit hurries past with visible embarrassment. A widow, the least protected person in her world, comes before a corrupt judge who fears neither God nor man, and she asks for justice, and he refuses. So she comes back, and back, and back until the judge, in the story's own words, grants her case purely so that her continual coming does not wear him out. And the teacher's point was not that heaven is corrupt. The point was aimed at the askers. Ask like her, shamelessly, repeatedly, as though refusal were simply not among the possible outcomes. The ancients called this importunity, and they ranked it among the virtues. We renamed it desperation and taught you to be embarrassed by it. One polite request, we said, and then let it go, do not be needy. And so the crowd learned to knock once, softly, and tiptoe away from the door of everything it ever wanted. Welcome to the heir's petition. And why were these halves removed? Ask yourself who benefits from a world of beggars. Every institution that ever stood between a human being and the source preferred its people humble, uncertain, returning weekly to ask again through proper channels. An heir is a governance problem. An heir with a siege mentality is ungovernable. The tense and the persistence were not lost in translation. They were expensive to the translators. Now the objection, and I want your strongest version of it. You will tell me believing I have received while my account is empty is not faith. It is delusion, and worse. It is entitlement, and you are training me to be insufferable. Let me stop you there and take the two charges in order. On entitlement, notice where the heir's certainty points. Entitlement makes demands of people, waiters, spouses, strangers. The world owes me, and you personally will pay. Inheritance makes no demand of any person at all. It is a settled posture toward the estate, not a bill presented to bystanders. The heir is, if anything, easier to be around because he has stopped auditioning. And on delusion, I will simply show you your own expertise. You already practice past tense faith fluently daily. I just know this will go badly. This always happens to me. Watch, they will cancel. You believe you have received disappointments that have not arrived yet. You feel them as done, and nobody calls you delusional for it. They call you realistic. The mechanism is installed and running. Tonight we are not asking you to learn a strange new power. We are asking you to turn the cannon around. So here is the protocol, the heir's petition. Choose the one thing. Formulate the ask once in a single clean sentence and then file it in the completed tense out loud as a receipt. Thank you. It is done. It is mine and it is in transit. And then this is where the widow enters. You will return to it daily, but hear the instruction precisely, because this is where sincere people ruin it. You do not re-ask. Re-asking reopens the case and files fresh doubt. You return the way you glance at a tracking number, not the way you resubmit an application. Each day, one confirmation. Still done. Still mine. Still in transit. The persistence of the widow in the posture of the heir, and carry the closer with you to the door. The beggar asks until he receives. The heir gives thanks until it arrives. The same words are available to both. They are simply mailed from different addresses, but something slipped in just now, quietly, the way important things do, gives thanks. Because the next restoration is gratitude, and of all 10 teachings in this book, none has been more completely gutted. What they handed you is a diary of leftovers. What the ancients practiced was closer to artillery. And the proof is a scene at a tomb, where the most reverent man in the story says thank you at the strangest possible moment. Before Chapter 5, Gratitude and the Missing Direction. In everything give thanks, the letter to the Thessalonians. And in the Gospel of John, a man stands before the sealed tomb of his friend, dead 4 days, the crowd weeping, the sisters accusing, and before anything happens, before any evidence cooperates, he lifts his eyes and says, "Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me." Then he calls Lazarus out. Mark the order of events, because the order is the teaching. The thanks came first. The stone was still in place. Here is the version you were given. The gratitude journal. 3 things at the end of the day: thank you for the coffee, the sunset, the parking spot. And let me be careful here, because I will not mock it. The evening count is real, it softens a mind, it belongs in a life. But notice what it is. It is bookkeeping. Thanks as receipt filing, gratitude aimed backward at goods already delivered, a pleasant audit of the past. The modern teaching kept the direction that costs nothing. Anyone can thank history. History has already signed. Now the restoration. The ancients aimed gratitude forward. Thanksgiving before the fact, thanks with the stone still in place, and they ranked it as the highest grade of faith for a reason buried in the grammar of thanks itself. Listen to the mechanics. Hope says, it might happen. Belief says it will happen. But thanks can only be said over something finished. You cannot sincerely thank for a maybe. So the moment a human being gives genuine thanks for a thing not yet visible, he has smuggled a completed verdict past every guard in his own skeptical mind. The court recorder who ignores your hopes and files your conclusions hears thank you and files one word. Done. Advance gratitude is not politeness. It is the heir's receipt from the last chapter, soaked in feeling and fired. Welcome to thanks with the stone still in place. And there is a second removed clause hiding in that line from Thessalonians. In everything give thanks. Not for everything, the ancients were not asked to celebrate the storm. In it, thanks practiced inside the storm while it howls, as the one act that keeps the inner state sovereign to the weather. Because here is what nobody told you about your complaining, and I say this with respect, because you learned it honestly. Complaint is advance gratitude's twin, running in reverse. When you complain, you are giving thanks to the disaster in advance. You presuppose its completion, you rehearse it as fact, you soak it in feeling, and the recorder files done. Every human being alive is already practicing prophetic thanksgiving, all day long. The only question this chapter asks is what you have been aiming it at. And why was this half removed? Because thanks before the fact requires nerve and looks foolish at the tomb and cannot be sold. A journal is safe. Nobody ever stood at their empty bank account and gave thanks out loud and felt respectable doing it. The removed half of gratitude was removed the way all the halves were removed, not by villains in a cellar, but by 1,000 years of people keeping the comfortable part. You will tell me, and say it plainly, this one feels like lying. Thanking God, or the universe, or my own mind for something that has not happened, feels false in my mouth, almost blasphemous, like presuming on an outcome I have no right to announce. Let me stop you there, and look with me once more at the man outside the tomb, because your objection was answered in the story itself. The most reverent figure in the entire account is the one who thanked earliest. Presumption would be ordering outcomes for your neighbor, announcing verdicts over other people's lives. That is not what advance thanks does. It stands inside the petition you have already filed as an heir, your own case, your own estate, and it simply refuses to keep reopening it with doubt. And if even that feels like too high a rung today, the ancients left a lower one, and it is sturdy. Thank for the hearing before you can thank for the delivery. Thank you that this is heard. Thank you that this is handled. No honest mouth chokes on that sentence, and it files the same quiet verdict where it matters. So here is the protocol, and it has a location attached because location is half its force. The stone speech. Once a day, go to the exact place where your lack lives. The empty inbox, the account screen, the quiet phone, the room that needs a person in it. Stand before your stone, look directly at it, and give thanks as done, one sentence, steady, unhurried. Thank you that this is finished and on its way. You are doing precisely what was done at the tomb, addressing completion to the face of the evidence. And add the storm clause for the hard days. Once, during genuine upset, not after it, in it, one deliberate thanks aimed at anything true. It will feel like striking a match in the rain. Strike it anyway. It is the match that proves who governs the weather in you, and take the closer with you. A journal thanks history, a commander thanks the future. The stone rolls for the second one, but by now a suspicion should be forming in you, and it does you credit. All of this is inner work, tenses and thanks and filings, and meanwhile the body sits in a chair. Was there not supposed to be motion? Was faith not supposed to move something? It was, and the surgery performed on that teaching was the boldest cut of all because they removed the feet. The ancients did not believe until they felt ready. The ancients walked into rivers. Chapter 6. Faith and the missing feet. Faith without works is dead. The letter of James, in 5 words that half the world has spent 2,000 years trying to soften. And in the book of Joshua, an instruction so strange that its strangeness is the teaching. Israel stands before the Jordan at flood stage, an entire nation with a river in its way, and the priests are told to carry the ark forward, and the water will part. But read the fine print, because everything you were never taught lives in the fine print. The river would not part while they watched from the bank. The promise was rigged to a trigger. When the soles of the feet of the priests rest in the waters, then the waters shall be cut off. Feet first, then river. Here is the version you were given. Faith as a feeling. A warmth you are supposed to summon on the couch. A certainty you must manufacture in advance, and then, once you finally feel confident, you may act. Believe hard enough, they said, and the world will move. And so the crowd sat down to work on its believing, and waited to feel ready, and the rivers of the world flowed on, entirely unbothered, past generations of people rehearsing confidence on the bank. Now the restoration, and it runs through every miracle story you were ever told, hiding in the sequence of events. Look at the order. The priest's feet touch the flood, and then it parts. 10 lepers cry out for healing, and the teacher does not heal them where they stand. He tells them, "Go, show yourselves to the priests," an instruction that only makes sense for men already clean, and the text says it plainly: as they went, they were cleansed. Not before they went. As Peter does not walk on water and then leave the boat. He leaves the boat, both hands off the rail, and the sea holds him only once his weight is committed to it. In the original teachings, faith is not a feeling that precedes action. Faith is a physical act performed while the evidence still says no. It is a posture of the body before it is a temperature of the heart. The ancients did not wait to feel it. They enacted it, and the feeling reported for duty mid-act, like the river parting around already wet feet. Welcome to the wet foot. And here is the mechanics, and it ties this chapter to everything you have built so far. You know by now that your deeper mind is a court recorder, filing testimony. Understand, then, its rules of evidence. Words are testimony, yes. Feelings are testimony. But action is testimony under oath. One small act performed as if the outcome were certain outranks an hour of imagining it, because the recorder reasons the way any court reasons. People say all kinds of things, but no one moves their body for a lie they fully believe is a lie. When you clear the shelf before there is anything to put on it, when you buy the boots before the journey is funded, when you send the work out before you feel like someone whose work gets sent out, the court receives evidence it cannot dismiss, and it revises the ruling on who you are. This is why the removed sequence matters so much. Feeling first is a permission slip you will wait your whole life for. Body first is a lever, available on any ordinary Tuesday to anyone with one small axe worth of nerve. And why was this half removed? Because acts can fail in public and feelings only fail in private. A teacher who tells you to believe on your couch can never be blamed for the river that did not part, and neither can you, and everyone stays comfortable, and nothing moves. The bank of the Jordan is the most crowded real estate on earth, and the crowd did not gather there by accident. It was taught there. Now, the objection, and this one is intelligent, so bring it with full force. You will tell me you are contradicting yourself. For 5 chapters it has been inner first, the tribunal, the gate, the decree, the tense, the thanks. State before circumstance, you said. And now suddenly it is body first, act before you feel it. Which is it? Let me stop you there, because it is both, and the both is the restoration. What was handed down to you were 2 broken halves of one circuit, sold separately for centuries, and each half alone produces the exact failure you have already lived. The inner half alone produces the dreamer, the person rich in visions and decrees who never enters the river, whose beautiful state, unenacted, is quietly repealed by bedtime every night, because the court noticed that the legislator himself does not act on his own laws. And the outer half alone produces the grinder, the person you have also been, all motion and no state, hurling effort at the river from a posture of lack, wet to the neck and still unparted, because action performed as a beggar files a beggar's testimony, only louder. The circuit is this. The state selects the act. The act seals the state. You decree as an heir in the evening, and in the morning you perform one thing only the heir would do, and each strengthens the other, around and around, until the inner and the outer are telling the court the same story. And when the 2 testimonies agree, rivers have no choice. That was always the trigger. So here is the protocol, the first step into the river. Each morning after your decree, choose one act with 2 properties. It must presuppose the outcome, meaning it only makes sense in the world where the thing is done. And it must be small enough to perform trembling, because trembling is permitted. The priest's knees are not recorded, only their feet. Send the one message. Book the one appointment. Clear the one shelf. Buy the one tool. Draft the resignation you have not yet earned the right to send, and date it. 1 wet foot a day. Not 10, 1, done before noon while the decree is still warm. And when the old voice asks what happens if the river does not part, give it the watchman's answer at the gate. That is the river's department. Mine is feet. and take the closer down to the water with you. Heaven waits politely at the bank of every Jordan, watching for one thing only: wet feet. But the moment you begin to act with real force, an old enemy wakes up, one the couch never disturbed. The white knuckle, the refreshed inbox, the outcome gripped so hard it bruises. You will act, and then you will hover over the result like a man trying to pull seedlings taller, and everything will tighten. The ancients saw this coming 3,000 years ago, on a battlefield of all places, and the answer they gave is the most misquoted sentence in the entire East. You were told it means care less. It means almost the opposite. Chapter 7, Effort and the Missing Release. You have a right to your actions, but never to the fruits of your actions. The Bhagavad Gita in the middle of a battlefield. And from Ecclesiastes, the strangest financial advice in Scripture. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Here is the version you were given. Let go and let the universe. Detachment as a synonym for shrugging. Surrender as a sofa. If it is meant for you, it will find you, they said. And a generation heard it as permission to stop rowing, and called the drifting spiritual, and drifted. That is one counterfeit. But be honest, you were also sold its opposite: hustle without release, white knuckles as work ethic, the checking, the refreshing, the gripping of every outcome like a man carrying water in his fists. Two broken halves again. The couch and the clench. Now the restoration, and for this one you must see the scene, because the scene is half the sentence. The Gita is not spoken in a garden. Arjuna, the greatest warrior of his age, stands in his chariot between two armies drawn up for battle, and he looks across the field and sees teachers, cousins, friends in the opposing lines, and his bow slips from his hand, and he sits down and says, "I will not fight." And it is there, to a man who wants nothing more than to withdraw from the action, that the teaching is given. Not "you are right, walk away, all is illusion." The instruction is fight, act, do the duty in front of you with full skill and total commitment, and then the blade of the sentence, but release the fruit. You own the action, you have never once owned the outcome. The modern world kept the release and deleted the fight and handed you a Gita for couches. The original is a Gita for battlefields, and its formula has two clauses that only work together: full force in the act, open hands on the result. Welcome to the potter's kiln, because the craftsman had this teaching too in clay. A potter may put everything into the wheel: her breath, her decades, the exact pressure of two thumbs. The shaping is entirely hers. And then the piece goes into the kiln, the door closes, and the fire takes over. And here is the law every potter learns in her bones, sometimes the expensive way. You cannot hold the pot while it fires. Open that door early to check, to adjust, just to look, and the cold air cracks the very thing your hands made perfectly. The kiln is not asking you to care less about the pot. It is asking you to understand jurisdiction. The wheel is yours. The fire was never yours. And there is a deeper clause still, the one that explains the mechanics of everything in this chapter. The fire can only take custody of what you actually hand over. A result gripped, monitored, hovered over, checked hourly, never fully enters the kiln at all. It sits in the doorway in the cold draft of your surveillance, half yours, half fired, cracking. The old sacrifices, the bread cast on moving water where it cannot be watched or retrieved, the offerings burned specifically, all of it was jurisdiction training. The release was never the opposite of the effort. The release was the delivery. And why was this half removed? Because each broken half flatters somebody. The couch half flatters the tired and sells beautifully, surrender as a scented candle. And the clench half flatters the industrious and sells even better, vigilance as virtue, the refreshing of the inbox as devotion. The full verse indicts both customers at once, the drifter for the missing fight and the gripper for the missing release. and a teaching that indicts every customer in the shop does not survive the marketplace. So it was quietly split, and each half was sold to the audience it comforted. Now, the objection, and it is the one every driven person makes, so make it with pride. You will tell me, my wanting is my engine. The hunger for the result is what gets me up at 5. If I release the fruit, I release the fuel, and you will turn me into one of the drifters you just described. Let me stop you there and look at where the wanting actually sits in your day, because location decides everything. Desire that stands upstream of the action in the morning, choosing the aim, loading the day. That desire is an engine, and the restored teaching does not touch it. Arjuna is not told to stop caring who wins the war. He is told to loose the arrow he has aimed. The parasite is downstream wanting, the wanting that continues during and after the act, the gnawing, the checking, the living at the kiln door. That is not fuel, and here is the proof from your own ledger. Count what the hovering has ever added. It has never once fired a pot faster. It leaks exactly the force the morning loaded into surveillance, into simulated control, and you arrive at evening spent not from the work, from the watching. Keep the wanting in the morning where it aims. Evict it from the afternoon where it gnaws. You will not lose your engine. You will finally stop driving with the brake on. So here are the protocols. The first is the handover. From now on, every completed act gets a spoken delivery, 5 seconds, formal, final. The message is sent, the piece is fired, my hands are off. Say it like a potter closing the kiln door, because that is what it is. And attach to each handover a firing window, size to the thing, a day for a message, a week for a submission, a season for a harvest, during which checking is simply off the calendar, not resisted hourly, decided once. The second is the fruit fast, once a week. Perform one act of full excellence that you will never track, never mention, and never check, ever. A gift with no receipt. You are training the deepest muscle in this chapter, the ability to pour everything into the wheel while owning nothing in the fire. And people who build that muscle become almost frightening to watch, because they act with the total commitment of someone who cares completely, and the total freedom of someone who has already let go. That combination was the whole point of the battlefield. And take the closer with you. You are entitled to the wheel, the water, and the clay. The fire was never yours. Shape, hand it over, and let the kiln keep its ancient hours. But now we have arrived at a border, and I want you to feel yourself crossing it. Everything so far, the tribunal, the gate, the decree, the tense, the thanks, the feat, the release, all of it can be practiced by a person who is still, in one specific way, occupied territory. There is a throne in you, and something is sitting on it. And the ancients had an entire science of taking it back that the modern world has not merely edited. It has erased it and replaced it with a single, smiling commandment: treat yourself. Part 3 is about what that commandment cost you. Part 3, the restorations of the throne. Chapter 8, appetite and the missing crown. He who rules his spirit is greater than he who takes a city. The Book of Proverbs, ranking self-command above military conquest in a world that worshipped military conquest. And the philosopher Epictetus, who began life as a slave and ended it freer than the emperors who read him, drew the line even harder. No man is free who is not master of himself. Here is the version you were given, and for this one, they did not even leave you a poster. The other teachings in this book were at least handed down in halves. This one was replaced. Fasting survives as a metabolic hack, discussed entirely in the vocabulary of insulin and eating windows. Discipline survives as a productivity tool, something you apply to your inbox. And renunciation, the deliberate chosen refusal that sat at the center of every serious tradition on this planet. Renunciation was deleted outright, and over the empty space where it stood, The modern world has installed a single smiling commandment, printed on mugs, whispered by advertisements offered as self-care. Treat yourself. You deserve it. Why wait? Now the restoration, and it begins with a pattern you can verify across every civilization that ever produced great human beings. The Desert Fathers fasted. The Stoics slept on hard floors by choice, men of rank rehearsing poverty in their own villas. The monks kept silence. The old orders kept vigils, and our age, encountering these practices, has diagnosed them all as self-punishment because our age has lost the category they belong to. They were not punishment. They were coronations. Every tradition that took power seriously paired it with voluntary refusal because they had discovered the throne this chapter is named for. In every human being there is a seat of command and something sits on it. Either you sit there or your appetites do. And appetite, understand, is a magnificent servant. Appetite built the pyramids and crossed the oceans. Appetite is not the enemy. Appetite is simply a catastrophic king. It rules for the next 10 minutes against the next 10 years, every time in every century. And the ancients found exactly one reliable way to establish who sits on the throne: the small, chosen refusal. Each time a human being says no to himself, quietly, deliberately, on purpose, a coronation occurs, tiny but real. The refusal is testimony, and by now you know the court it is filed in. I rule here. Filed, precedent, ruling. Welcome to the throne room. And here is where this book's gentlest sentence must be its firmest. Why was this teaching removed, not edited, removed? Follow the money all the way down. A person who cannot tell himself no has outsourced his throne, and whoever controls the supply controls the man. He is the finest customer civilization has ever produced. One click, same-day delivery. His impulses wired directly to his wallet with no king in between to review the requests. Entire economies now stand on the missing crown. The other halves in this book were dropped because they were demanding. This one was buried because it was bad for business, and it stays buried for the same reason. And every voice in your world crying deprivation the moment you delay a pleasure by 1 hour is, knowingly or not, working for the occupation. Now, the objection, and this one I will handle with both hands, because for some of you it is not an argument, it is a scar. You will tell me, I have seen where this road goes. I have known refusal that was really self-hatred wearing a holy costume, restriction that called itself discipline and was punishment, and I want no part of a teaching that makes misery a virtue. Let me stop you there, and hear this clearly, because the restored teaching agrees with you. What you are describing is not the crown. It is a second occupation. When refusal comes from self-contempt, when it is aimed at the mirror, when it keeps score against your worth, then the appetite of punishment has simply seized the throne instead, and the ancients would tell you to refuse that tyrant too. The coronation refusal is different in every measurable way. It is small. It is chosen in the morning, not seized in a dark mood. It is time-boxed, an hour, a day, never open-ended. It is aimed at sovereignty, never at worth, and it is paid with something closer to a smile than a wince, the quiet satisfaction of a king reviewing a request and saying, "Not today," and meaning it and moving on. If a refusal cannot be done lightly, it is the wrong refusal. Choose a smaller one. The throne is taken by coins, not by wounds. So here is the protocol in 2 parts, and the second part is not optional, because it is what keeps the first part sane. The first is the daily coin. Each morning name one small refusal for the day and vary the territory deliberately, because the point is command of the whole kingdom, not war with one province. The coffee delayed an hour. The phone left home for the length of a walk. The elevator declined. The snooze button retired for one morning. The comeback swallowed in one conversation. The dessert skipped once without ceremony. Pay the coin before evening, and when it is paid, mark it with a single inner word: crown. That is the whole rite. One coin every day, and understand what you are actually buying, because it is not the walk or the skipped dessert. You are buying testimony daily, filed, compounding, that when you decide something in this kingdom, it happens. And the day is coming sooner than you think, when you will issue a large command to yourself, the kind this whole book has been preparing, and it will simply be obeyed without the civil war, because the court will check the record and find years of precedent. And the second part is the feast rule, and it is the ancients' own seal, because their calendars, look closely, were not endless fasts. They were fasts and feasts, and the feasts were kept as seriously as the fasts. Once a week, choose one pleasure and take it completely. Deliberately, unhurried, with full attention and zero guilt, the good meal actually tasted, the free evening actually enjoyed, the rest actually rested. Because a king who can only say no has not taken the throne either, he has just changed tyrants. Sovereignty is proven in both directions. The storehouse locked on Tuesday and opened wide on Sunday, by the same hand on purpose. Command the no and command the yes, and there is no room left on the throne for anything but you. And take the closer with you, because it reframes a word you hear every day. They kept teaching you to feed every hunger the moment it spoke, and they called it freedom. The ancients watched a man obey his every appetite, and they used a different word: occupied. But a sovereign, once crowned, looks around and discovers something the crowd never notices. The kingdom is not only inside. There is a desk, a room, a morning, a doorway you pass through every day. And the ancients had one line about the relationship between the inner throne and the outer kingdom, a line you have quoted your whole life as cosmic poetry, never suspecting it was an instruction manual with the second half torn out. As above, so below. The ninth restoration is about the torn half, and it is within reach of your hands tonight. Chapter 9. As above, so below, and the missing direction back. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. The Emerald Tablet, the oldest and most famous sentence in the entire Hermetic tradition. And from the Zen records, a monk asks the master Joshu for the teaching, says he is new in the monastery, asks to be instructed. Joshu asks, "Have you eaten your rice?" The monk says yes. Joshu says, "Then wash your bowl." And the monk, the record tells us, was enlightened. Hold both of those in your hands. The grandest sentence in Western mysticism, and a man being handed the whole of Zen in the form of a dirty bowl. They are the same teaching. One of them still has its engine. Here is the version you were given. As above, so below has been reduced to cosmic trivia, a line for posters of galaxies. The universe is fractal, patterns repeat, how marvelous, and the quoter gazes upward, nods at the symmetry, and changes nothing. And even the practical shred that survived into the modern world, make your bed, tidy your desk, arrived gutted, stripped of its metaphysics, sold as productivity, a habit for getting ahead, which is why it inspires nobody for longer than a week. Now the restoration. The Hermetic sentence was never a description to admire. It was an instrument, and the instrument works in both directions, and the second direction is the one they left out. Yes, the above shapes the below, the inner state projects outward. That is the direction this whole tradition teaches, and the first 8 chapters have drilled. But the craftsmen and the priests knew the direction back. The below is a handle on the above. Matter is a lever on mind. Arrange the outer deliberately, ritually, and the inner obeys the arrangement. This is why every serious tradition, without a single exception, built things. Temples, when a field would have been cheaper. Vestments, incense, processions, candles lit in a particular order, bowls washed as if the washing mattered because it did. None of it was decoration, and none of it was for the gods' vanity. It was below work. It was the science of commanding invisible states through visible arrangements, the body and the room used as instruments played upon the self. The monk's washed bowl is a decree. The straightened tool bench is a decree. The made bed, restored to its original voltage, is not a chore. It is legislation passed in fabric, the first law of the day. Welcome to the direction back. And here is the mechanics in the language of the court you now know so well. The recorder does not only file your words and your acts, it files your rooms. Continuously, wordlessly, all day, your environment testifies about who lives here, and the testimony is admitted without objection because you never think to object. The chair that holds the laundry testifies. The dead plant testifies. The cracked screen you swipe 1,100 times a day testifies, and what it says, over and over in the tireless voice of things, is chaos lives here, neglect lives here, later lives here. You have been doing below work your entire life. Hear that clearly, unconsciously, and in the negative. This chapter does not add a new practice so much as it ends an old prosecution. And the ancients, being practical, knew you cannot consecrate everything, which is precisely why they invented the altar. Not the whole city, one table. Not the whole house, one corner kept perfect, charged on purpose, radiating outward. The concentration was the technology. A small zone of total order testifies louder than a large zone of vague tidiness, the way one lit candle rules a dark room. And why was this half removed? Because the priestly direction embarrasses the modern tongue. Ritual, consecration, threshold rites, the modern age filed all of it under superstition, kept the hygiene, and lost the voltage. You were permitted to clean for guests and for productivity. You were never told you could arrange matter as a command to your own deep mind, because a person who knows that owns a temple for the price of a tidy square meter, and there is nothing to sell him. Now the objection, and it is the practical person's objection, so give it its full weight. You will tell me, my problems are not on my desk. Cleaning a corner will not pay my debts, heal my body, or return what I have lost, and there is something almost offensive in suggesting that the great work of this book comes down to housekeeping. Let me stop you there, because no one has suggested the desk pays the debts. The desk votes. Here is the honest chain of command. The debts are moved by decisions. The decisions are made by a state. And the state, this is the restored clause, is being assembled every hour partly out of the testimony of your surroundings. You already believe this in reverse notice. You have felt a hotel room make you calmer, a cluttered table make a hard day heavier, a single clean shirt change how you walked into a building. You have never once called that superstition. The restoration only asks you to stop receiving that force accidentally and start issuing it deliberately in one small jurisdiction as a daily act of the crown you took in the last chapter. So here is the protocol in 2 movements. The first is the altar square. Choose 1 square meter of your world. A desk corner, the bedside table, the shelf by the door, 1 square meter, no more. Ambition is the enemy of consecration. Clear it completely, and then admit objects by the gate rule from Chapter 2, friends of the city only. Things that testify to the person you are becoming, the instrument of your craft, the single book, the one clean surface, perhaps one beautiful thing with no function at all, which is its function. And then daily tend it for 1 minute. In silence, unhurried as a rite, not a chore, straightening, dusting, restoring, and understand what you are doing in the language of this book. You are passing the same law every day in matter. Order lives here. Intention lives here. I rule here, and the below agrees with the above. The second movement is the threshold act, because the ancients worked the body the same way they worked the room. Choose 1 doorway you pass through every day, The front door, the office door, the door of the room where your work happens, and attached to it one small physical right. The spine straightened as you cross. One full breath on the threshold. The shoulders rolled back and down. 3 seconds, no witness would even notice, but you will have converted a piece of architecture into an instrument that retunes your state several times a day, below commanding above, exactly as the tablet promised, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. And take the closer with you. The stars are above and the desk is below, and the teaching was never about admiring the symmetry between them. It was about which end of it you can reach with your hands. But there remains one restoration, the last, the one I have saved not because it is the darkest, but because it is the strongest. The sentence the ancient world kept on its desks and at its feasts and in its morning prayers, and the modern world has hidden from you more completely than all the others combined. Not because it was demanding, because it works too well. It is the teaching that makes every other chapter in this book urgent instead of interesting, and the institutions of comfort cannot allow it, because a person who practices it becomes, within weeks, almost impossible to frighten and almost impossible to stall. The ancients called it the remembrance. You have 30 seconds of resistance to it left. Spend them and then come with me. Chapter 10. The remembrance and the missing clock. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, writing to himself in a private notebook he never intended you to read. And the Psalms in the form of a request. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Notice what the psalm assumes. That numbering the days is a skill, that it must be taught, and that its product is not gloom but wisdom. Here is the version you were given. Life is short as a caption under a cocktail, a skull as an aesthetic printed on shirts, inked on forearms, sold as edgy decor by the same culture that would rather do anything than mean it. You only live once, deployed exclusively to justify the desert, never the destiny. The phrase survived everywhere. The practice survives almost nowhere, and that is not an accident of history. Of all 10 removals in this book, this one was performed with the most care. Now the restoration, and let me show you how universally it was practiced, because the agreement across civilizations is itself the evidence. The Stoics rehearsed the remembrance every morning, not annually, every morning, the way you check the weather. The desert monks kept a skull on the writing desk, and visitors mistook it for decoration, and it was never decoration. It was a clock, the only honest one in the room. And Herodotus records that the Egyptians, at their richest banquets at the height of the wine and the music, would carry a carved figure of a corpse around the tables and present it to each guest with the same words. Look on this. Drink and be merry. For when you die, you will be like this. And here is what the modern reader always misses about that scene. It did not ruin the feast. It was the feast. The guests did not push their plates away. They tasted at last what was on them. Welcome to the remembrance, because here is the mechanics and it is the strongest medicine in this entire book. There are 2 thieves that steal a human life, and they steal far more of it than any tragedy ever will. The first thief is trivial fear. What will they think? What if it is awkward? What if I look foolish, asking, publishing, beginning, dancing? And the second thief is trivial delay. Someday, when things settle down. Next year when I am ready. The one after this. Now watch what happens to both thieves in the light of the remembrance, because it happens instantly, and you can feel it happen in your own chest tonight. Hold the fact steadily, the fact you have spent your whole life politely not looking at, that your days are numbered and the number is not published, and now look back at the thieves. The trivial fear shrinks to its actual size, which is nothing, because the committee whose opinion you feared holds no jurisdiction at the horizon. And the trivial delay is exposed as what it always was, not patience, but a gamble, staked on a currency you have never once counted. The remembrance does not add urgency to your life. It reveals the urgency that was always true and hidden, and it converts it, note this word, not into panic but into priority. Panic runs in circles. Priority walks in a straight line. And this is why the 10th restoration comes last, because it is the frame around the other 9. The tribunal, the watchman, the clean mouth, the heirs tense, the advance thanks, the wet feet, the open hands, the daily crown, the altar square, all of them are true on any timeline. But on an unnumbered timeline, they are interesting. On a numbered one, they are tonight's business. Scarcity is what mints value. The ancients said it in 100 ways, and the days are the ultimate currency precisely because the supply is fixed and unknown. The remembrance is not the morbid chapter. It is the chapter that makes the others expensive. And why was this one buried deepest? Because nothing on earth empties a marketplace faster than mortality honestly held. The entire engine of endless consumption runs on the 2 thieves, on someday, which keeps you accumulating for a future self who will finally live, and on trivial fear, which keeps you purchasing armor for the opinions of strangers. A person healed of both is a catastrophe for that economy. He buys what he needs and goes home to his actual life. She stops auditioning and starts building. Such people cannot be stampeded, cannot be shamed into upgrades, cannot be stalled with promises about later. The remembrance was not too dark for the modern world. It was too strong. So it was not argued against, it was sedated, turned into a caption, a shirt, a wink, and the crowd was given the phrase so that it would never suspect it had lost the practice. Now the objection, and I will hold it gently, because for some of you it is not an objection, it is 3 in the morning. You will tell me I do not need reminding. The thought of the end already finds me, uninvited in the dark, and it does not make me wise, it makes me cold. Why would I schedule the very visitor I dread? Let me stop you there and see the difference, because it is the difference between drowning and swimming in the same water. What visits you at 3 in the morning is dread, and dread has a signature. It is unchosen, it arrives when you are weakest. It is formless, it has no edges, no question, no end. And it is idle, it assigns you nothing, it just sits on your chest. The remembrance is the same fact, held in the opposite grip. It is chosen, you open the door, which changes everything about who is in command. It is brief, a minute with a beginning and an end. It is held in daylight with your feet on the floor. And above all, it is tasked. It always ends with an assignment, which is the one thing dread can never give you. You do not cure the 3 in the morning visitor by avoiding the subject all day. You cure him by granting the subject one dignified, scheduled minute in the morning, after which the account is settled, and the night has nothing left to ambush you with. And one more thing said softly. If loss is fresh in your house, if grief is standing in the room as you hear this, you have my word that this chapter will wait for you. Practice the other 9. This one will still be true when you are ready, and it will be gentler by then. So here is the protocol in 2 movements, and notice how small they are, because the ancients knew this medicine is dosed in drops. The first is the horizon minute. Tomorrow morning, once near the start of the day, hold the fact steadily for the length of a few slow breaths. You could leave life right now, says the emperor. Look at that sentence without flinching and without drama, the way you would check a compass. And then ask the 2 questions and answer fast from the gut. What just became trivial? What just became urgent? And then the tasking, 1 item from the urgent column gets acted on before noon. The call made. The word said. The page begun. The apology delivered. 1 item every day chosen by the horizon instead of by the inbox. That is the whole practice, and within a week you will notice its strange arithmetic, that 1 minute of remembering the end returns you hours of actually living the middle. The second is the Egyptian toast once a week at a meal you love with people you love if you have them near. At some point silently, inwardly, raise the old toast to the shortness that makes this sweet. That is all. No speech, no gloom, just 1 second of the banquet scene truly, the carved figure passing the table and the taste of everything sharpening as it passes. The Egyptians were not interrupting the feast. They were unlocking it. And take the closer with you into every morning you have left. The ancients kept death on the desk so that life would not be left in the drawer. If you enjoyed this audiobook, I created a free ebook version for you. It's the first link in the description and in the pinned comment below this video. Conclusion: the restored copy. So here we stand at the end of the restorations, and I want you to look at what you are now carrying because it is heavier and finer than what you walked in with. You came here with 10 posters. You are leaving with 10 engines. Know thyself with its tribunal reattached, be still with its watchman at the gate, the word with its oath, the ask with its tense, the thanks with its direction turned around, faith with its wet feet, effort with its open hands, the appetite with its crown, the desk with its altar, and the days with their number honestly held. Understand what you have become in the last 2 hours because it is not a small thing. The complete teachings survive in exactly one form, and it is not in books. Books can be edited, they have been. The complete teachings survive in carriers, in people who practice the whole instruction, and tonight you became one. The editing, meanwhile, will not stop. Comfort never retires. At this very moment, in a million feeds and a million shops, the demanding halves of true things are being quietly sanded off for tomorrow's crowd. You cannot stop that. You were never asked to. You were asked only to keep one complete copy alive, the one with your name on it, and no editor on earth can touch that copy without your signature. So do not believe me. I said it at the door of another book, and I will say it at this one: belief is cheap, and I have no use for it. Run the experiments. Tonight, before sleep, hold the first tribunal, 3 questions, 1 correction, full acquittal. Tomorrow, before noon, put 1 foot in 1 river, 1 act that presupposes the outcome, small enough to do trembling. And by the weekend, consecrate your square meter, 1 minute a day, matter passing law. 3 experiments, 7 days. If nothing moves, you have lost a week. But things will move, and you already suspect it, because the halves I handed you tonight did not feel like news. They felt like recognition. That was your own soul, checking its inventory and finding the missing pages exactly where I said they would be, where they have always been. In you, waiting to be remembered. And I warn you one last time because the warning is a compliment now. The poster half of every teaching forgave you every day you ignored it. The engine half will not. It will hum in your pocket at the hour of the tribunal. It will clear its throat when you testify against yourself. It will glance at your feet every morning at the bank of every river, demanding things do that. It is how you know they are alive. If this restoration reached you, seal it. Subscribe to this channel not as an audience but as a carrier so the next recovered volume finds you the way this one did. Thank you for staying to the last page. Thank you for being the kind of person who always suspected the sentence was longer. Ancient wisdom quietly left out of every modern teaching. Tonight, quietly put back. What you do with it next will not be quiet at all. Court adjourned. Gate manned. Feet wet. Go. If you enjoyed this audiobook, I handpicked this next book, which will change your life.